Something feels different right now because we're finally getting to that part of the year where the real questions start showing up. This is where things stop being about predictions and start becoming about competition. Spots are open, players are trying to prove themselves, and every practice suddenly starts meaning a little more. Some guys are fighting to climb the depth chart. Others are trying to show they belong. And honestly, this is where some of the biggest surprises usually start. If you're hyped to see how all of this plays out, smash that like button and drop "Go Hawks" in the comments if you're riding with the team all season long. The Seattle Seahawks are heading into OTAs with several major questions quietly building inside the roster. And one of the biggest developments revolves around a situation that suddenly feels much more open than many people expected. What initially looked simple is no longer simple at all, because several positions that seem to have obvious answers now appear to be completely up for grabs. The interesting part is that this is not just about finding starters. This is about finding players capable of forcing coaches to make difficult decisions. And there are already signs that competition may become one of the biggest stories surrounding Seattle in these early stages. The information surrounding these OTA storylines points directly toward several battles that could reshape expectations inside the team. The first situation getting attention is the running back room, because right now it feels like a complete free-for-all. With Zach Charbonnet dealing with injury issues and not being part of the immediate competition, suddenly a group of players now has an opportunity to establish themselves in ways that probably looked impossible not too long ago. And this is where things become fascinating because every player in this battle brings something different to the table. Jadarian Price immediately enters the conversation as one of the names creating the most discussion. There are already voices around football saying he could eventually become Seattle's #1 option in the backfield. But there is an important detail attached to that possibility. Nothing is being handed out. Nothing appears guaranteed. The message surrounding the situation is very clear. A player must earn his role. Price has reportedly shown vision that has people paying attention, but what may be even more interesting is the discussion around his receiving ability. There seems to be a feeling that his skills in that area might be better than many expected. That could become a significant factor because versatility can create opportunities quickly. But talent alone does not automatically create playing time. Then you start looking at Emmanuel Wilson and George Holani, and the conversation becomes even more difficult. Wilson has been described more as a physical runner, while Holani brings a different style, one based more around vision and processing. Different strengths create different possibilities. And when coaches start evaluating players during OTA work, those differences can become very important. Kenny McIntosh enters the larger picture as well, and suddenly the question stops being, "Who is good?" and starts becoming, "Who fits best?" Because if Seattle eventually wants a powerful two-player combination in the running game, the chemistry between players could matter almost as much as individual ability. And that's why this battle suddenly feels bigger than people may realize. OTAs are not the final answer. Nobody wins a job permanently here. But foundations can absolutely be built during these periods. Perceptions start changing. Coaches begin seeing players differently. Small moments become important. Another major storyline is happening on the offensive line, particularly around the right guard position. This situation feels like it has slowly developed into one of the most interesting internal competitions on the roster, because there appears to be one specific area where things remain unsettled. Anthony Bradford has become a central name in this discussion, but so has Bo Stevens. And there seems to be a growing belief that Stevens could put himself into a serious position if he handles these opportunities correctly. The reasoning behind that conversation is connected to what Stevens showed in college. The idea being discussed is that he possesses traits that fit what Seattle wants offensively. pass protection, run blocking, limiting pressures, avoiding mistakes, minimizing penalties. And if that evaluation proves accurate, then OTAs suddenly become extremely important for him. Because even if a starting job is not officially won here, momentum absolutely can be gained. Coaches notice consistency. Players notice consistency. Teammates notice consistency. Imagine a situation where every practice starts creating the same reaction. Imagine people beginning to say they want Stevens on the field more often. Imagine that feeling building over time. That is how position battles begin shifting. Then another storyline emerges on the defensive side with the safety room. And this one almost feels surprising considering expectations that existed before. Initially, there may have been thoughts that the path looked relatively clear. But then Bud Clark entered the picture and changed the conversation. The discussion surrounding Clark is difficult to ignore because his production immediately catches attention. 15 interceptions across 4 years stands out. Creating turnovers matters. Defensive playmakers matter. But it is not only the interceptions creating excitement. There are also discussions surrounding leadership qualities and tackling ability, creating the possibility that Seattle suddenly has multiple players deserving serious consideration. Now, the question becomes even more complicated because there are already names expected to play significant roles, including Julian Love. And if multiple players can handle multiple responsibilities, then perhaps the conversation stops being about choosing one player and starts becoming about finding ways to use several of them together. The idea of multiple safeties sharing the field at the same time suddenly becomes a very interesting possibility because flexibility appears to be a major part of the defensive vision being discussed. And that creates another layer of intrigue heading into OTAs. Because the biggest stories are sometimes not the obvious stories. Sometimes the biggest stories are hidden inside competitions that slowly start changing everything. As Seattle enters these OTA sessions, there are questions everywhere. Which running back separates himself? Does someone unexpectedly take control at right guard? Can emerging defensive talent force larger conversations? What do you think, Seahawks fans? Which of these OTA battles do you believe will become the biggest story? And who do you think has the most to prove? Another major point quietly building during these OTAs revolves around a player that many fans are going to be watching from the moment practices begin. Jalen Milroe suddenly enters this period with a lot of curiosity surrounding his development because while there is no discussion about him entering a competition for the current starting role, there is still a much bigger question floating around the situation. Has he taken a real step forward? Because what makes this interesting is not necessarily what happens this season. The focus appears much larger than that. The conversation is about potential. The conversation is about long-term growth. There is a belief surrounding Milroe that the talent is there. The physical tools are there, but talent by itself has never been the entire story. The difference between potential and reality has always been development. Reports surrounding his off-season work indicate that he has been putting himself in positions to improve, including work with quarterback coaches during the off-season. And if there is genuine progress happening, that creates a very interesting situation for Seattle moving forward. Because even if he does not see significant action immediately, opportunities can still exist in specific packages and situations. There is already discussion about possible change of pace scenarios, particularly in certain offensive situations where his skill set could bring a different element to the field. Then there is another storyline that might quietly become one of the most important of all. The first look at offensive coordinator Brian Fleury. This is where fans may finally begin getting small clues about what Seattle wants to become offensively. Not complete answers, not the entire playbook, but hints. How does the offense operate? How does the tempo look? What changes are noticeable? Because while expectations are that certain things may remain similar, there are also expected adjustments and differences. And maybe the biggest question attached to all of this is whether Fleury can maximize the players around him. Can he elevate the offense? Can he help create a better version of the talent already inside the building? These are the kinds of questions that OTAs quietly begin answering. Because football may not officially feel completely back yet, but once these competitions start unfolding, once players begin separating themselves, once coaches start making evaluations, everything changes. If you enjoyed this update, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and click the video appearing on your screen right now, because the newest Seattle Seahawks updates and breaking developments are waiting for you here first.